I love change. I love change. I have been like this my entire life. I've loved the changing of seasons, no matter what was happening at the beginning of the season. I'm like, yeah. Changing, starting a new school year, woohoo! Going into summer break, what? This is wonderful. I love change. I always have. Moving to a new city. Changing jobs. Now, sometimes, what made the change happen? Not so fun. But I really, I've been able to, throughout my life, cultivate an appreciation for change, even when it's something that I didn't want, or didn't think I wanted, or didn't think I asked for, right? I loved, how many of you like change in here? Oh, yeah, whoa. Usually this is not a very popular perspective. I'm not talking to any of you. So, I'm just kidding. So I love change, but here's the other deal. I am moving. As many of you know, I love you guys. Thank you. I love you. Thank you for being so sad. It is a strange thing, but it really touches my heart. Thank you so much for your love and appreciation, for your well wishes, even with but yay. Thank you so much. I'm moving. And so what that means is that I am packing up my house, right? Preparing it to sell. Pictures are tomorrow. So directly after this, I'm running home to finish the zhuzhing. And my house is filled with a lot of little tchotchkes and cositas and cochinaditas, the little things. I have so much of the little sweet, precious things. And I've done the Marie Kondo, do you bring me joy? Yes. Oh my God, I love you so much. And I'm dusting it off because I haven't looked at it in a while, but it brings me joy. So I'm packing up a ton of this stuff. And then, of course, as many people, not all people, my sister-in-law does everything right away the minute she moves in. But as many people, oh, we need to do this. We should totally do that. Did we do it? No. We're doing it now. We just got, a couple of weeks ago, we got our house restuccoed. It's so pretty. And I'm like, why did we wait to restucco the house for somebody else? Why did we do that? Oh, my goodness. And I always say, next time, I'm not going to do this. Whatever. I like change, but what I'm noticing this time around is it's a little hard. It's a little hard. It's a little hard emotionally. I've gotten attached to the things that I have here in northern New Mexico, to the people that I know and love, to the places that I get to visit and speak, to my neighborhood. When you're selling a house, you're thinking about all the things that would make it sell, right? This is a great neighborhood. I live in the North Valley. This is a very desirable place to live, on the edge of the North Valley, but it's still really cool and it's walkable. I have a new coffee shop that's 2 blocks away. There's a library that's 1 block away. I have a grocery. So I'm going on, I'm like, oh my God, it's so great here. Why was I complaining this whole time? Why was I upset about it? So, and not to mention cleaning and packing, and my body is exhausted, right? Before, when I would move, it was okay, we're going to clean the house and move and pack, and it's no big deal. Now I'm oh my God, I have to get back on the floor, and then back up again. And then I forgot to do something while I was down there, so I have to do it again. Oh my goodness. So change this time around, I am experiencing it differently. But what is pulling me through is that I know that what I'm moving for is the thing that I have desired for over 2 decades, to serve and lead a community. Isn't that so cool? I get to serve and lead a community down in Las Cruces. And I'm 45 minutes from my mama and an hour from my dad. It's really cool. So it pulls me through. So this change is harder than I've experienced before, but it's so great because I know that it is for something that I want, right? What if it's not something you've asked for or even want? When change comes upon you, I feel the weight of that. I'm going to pause for just a second. Today I'm talking about navigating change. Navigating change. And I went back and forth in the subtitle, Finding Stillness in Shifting Sand, and looking at the winds of change. Many of you might be having changes that you're experiencing in your own life, in your personal life. You might be having changes in your physical experience, right? An ability to get up and down from the floor, a diagnosis, just changes in your abilities. We might be experiencing changes in your relationships. So friendships could be changing and shifting, maybe ending. Love relationships. Maybe it's starting. Maybe it's a brand new love relationship. It's exciting, but it's still change. And that can be challenging for so many of us. And beyond that, when we look at the more collective change, the societal change, political change, changes that we see in the world around us, a world that we belong to. Right now is a time of social upheaval, and tensions are high. The minute I said that, what if this is something that you've not asked for or even want, there was a, right? And I saw heads nodding. For some of you, these changes might feel like progress. For some of you, these changes might be what you have hoped for and wanted. And for some of you, these changes might feel like loss and heartbreak and frustration. But no matter how you feel about the changes that are happening personally for yourself in your own life or collectively, going through change requires something of us. So I want you to think about whether you're in a change right now, or you're just supporting someone through change, or you've been in it in the past. So things are always changing, so you can relate to this in one way or another. I know for myself, socially, collectively, and in my personal change, I can feel that there is something that is wanting to be expressed, that is being called from me when I pay attention. When I move into the silent moment, I can feel that there is something that is pulling upon me. And I don't always have the answer like, oh, it's this, I need to show up in this way. It's often just like, okay, I don't know what that is. So today what I want to do is explore 3 spiritual anchors. 3 anchors that can hopefully help us to navigate change, not to just endure it. Not to just endure it. And I have been, in the midst of my own change, definitely been saying, okay, but at some point in the future, like by summer, I'm on the other side of this. I am living in Las Cruces. I have a place to live, and I'm leading this community, and I can envision myself happy. I've survived it. Sometimes I've got to go to survival. There's not a problem with that. However, what I'm talking about is, how do we go through this? How do we go through change with grace and courage and faith beyond survival? How do we do it? By keeping ourselves, by keeping that essential self that we have longed for and desired and prayed for and worked for and done classes for and read and shown up in rooms like this. That person. Because I know I can get caught up in the, oh my God, and right, and can you believe it? And what? No way. Oh my gosh, and how awful, and this is horrible. Very easily, right? It's low-hanging, it's not fruit, because I like fruit, but it's low-hanging. It's stuff that's easy to access when we're and there's something about the connection with another person. But what I'm talking about is, how do we go through that and maintain that integrity of who we intend to be, of who we desire to be, as we move through that change. There's strength in that. So 3 ways, these are the 3 things I'm talking about: acknowledging the reality of change, finding stillness, and acting from love, not fear. All right, so the first one, acknowledging the reality of change. We cannot stop the wind. And as a lot of things, the first step can be the hardest, so we're going to spend a little more time in this one. So it's really tempting to resist change, right? I like it the way that it is. Or, I don't like it, but I'm used to it. It's okay, but I know it, right? It is really tempting, and I think it's kind of human nature in some ways, for us to want to have things stay the same, to resist change. And have you ever tried to stop the wind? Like you yourself, like your human body? A couple of weeks ago, I was down south. Allergies. I was down south on my family farm, and I grew up on a pecan orchard. And so I'm at home, and I wake up early in the morning. And every year, we always used to buy a real Christmas tree and plant it. So we've also got these really big, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but we've got really tall, big, mature pine trees around our house. And so I wake up at like 2:30 in the morning. Oh, scary. I'm surrounded by acres of pecan trees and these giant pine trees. And I imagined myself getting up in the morning and going out to the middle of the driveway right in front of Mom's house and being like, stop! How well is that going to work? We cannot stop the wind. Change is constant in our lives, whether we embrace it or not. Change is constant. The question is not how do we stop change, but how do we move with it? How do we move with it without losing ourselves? How do we move with change without losing ourselves? So you might have had the diagnosis delivered. You might be experiencing a shift in your ability physically. The relationship might have shifted or ended or is starting. Our society has changed, and it is changing. The first thing that we want to do is acknowledge that change is happening. It is happening. It's real. And we might experience both loss and opportunity in any change. And we want to be sure that we honor the grief and the fear that we're experiencing. This is not about, oh, it's all rainbows and butterflies, and this is going to work out really well for me in the end, I know. No, we don't want to do a spiritual bypass. I'm scared. I have to sell my house. Somebody's got to buy it. And then because I need the money from my house to buy my new house, I have to find a house, make an offer on the house. I have to say, sure, we'll take it on contingency. And then have that line up so that I move out of this house and drive the truck. I'm not driving the truck. Take the truck to Las Cruces, and I can unload it in the house in that right time. Like, that's the ideal. I'm scared. I'm scared of that process. Like, oh, why? Because I'll be fine. It'll be harder. And I'm scared of it because I don't understand it. I don't know how it works. Somebody else is going to be taking care of that. We honor our grief and our fear. We see it, we look at it, we say, yep, that's happening, but we don't let those fears, we don't let that grief define us. We move beyond it. When we feel it and express it, now we can go on to the next. Acceptance is not giving up. And this is a tough one. I had a really hard time with this one for the longest time, for years and years and years. Luckily, I've moved through that. But acceptance is not giving up. When we accept that something is, what it allows us to do is now respond instead of react. We get to think through and make plans and identify who we are in this moment, what this situation is. Accepting is not giving up. Byron Katie, who I love, she's the author of Loving What Is. she teaches this core idea. Suffering comes not from what happens, but from our thoughts about what's happening. Suffering comes to us not from what happens, but from our thoughts about what's happening. That's where the suffering happens. She has this technology, this process that she has. It's called the work, and it's a 4-question process that helps us process through our stressful thoughts. The first question is it true? Right? Like, oh my God, this is unfair, that this is what's happening in this situation for me right now. I'm at this point in my life, and it shouldn't be this way. I should be able to move through my golden years in prosperity and joy and peace. Is it true? This is a follow-up question, because most of the time we're like, yeah, yeah, that's true. That's what it should be. The second question is, can I absolutely know that that's true? Can I absolutely know that it should 100% be a cakewalk for me at this stage in my life, that I shouldn't have the diagnosis, that I shouldn't have to move into an Airbnb between my house and the next one and pay for storage and pay for this and pay. Do I know that it shouldn't be that way? The third question, how do I react when I believe that thought? It shouldn't be that way. I can see my little self. It shouldn't be that way. How do I react when I believe that thought? And who would I be without that thought? Imagine for just a moment, in whatever the biggest situation, dynamic, whether current or past, that has been some consternation for you, that you were resisting. It's natural, y'all. Who would you be without that thought? That it shouldn't be that way. When I do that, I can feel my whole body kind of relax. If I wasn't fighting, who would I be? This isn't passive acceptance. It's empowerment instead of resistance. Another way to look at it is from the perspective of the parable of the farmer. Have you ever heard of that one? So there's a farmer. He's got his farm. And one day, one of his horses runs away. And his neighbors all come over. These are very nosy neighbors. They come, oh my gosh, this is horrible, it's terrible. And he says, well, maybe. And then a few days later, his horse comes back, and he's got 3 buddies with him. He's got 3 other wild horses with him. And his neighbors come over again and like, oh my God, what a blessing. This is the most amazing thing. And the farmer's like, maybe. And then the next day, there's a lot of activity going on. The next day, his son, who helps him on the farm, gets on the back of one of those wild horses to take it for a ride, and the horse, being wild, bucks him off. He flies off and breaks his leg. And the neighbors, this is like Gladys from Bewitched, right? The neighbors come over, oh my gosh, this is so horrible. He helps you on the farm. This is just terrible. And the farmer says, maybe. And then the next week, the army comes through. And they're drafting young men for war. And because his son's leg is broken, he's spared. And the neighbors one more time come over. Oh my gosh, what a blessing. You are so lucky. And the farmer says, maybe. So what does this teach us? Is that so many times when things happen in our lives, we rush to label them. We rush to call them good, wonderful, blessings, or terrible, horrible. You're never going to recover from this. We rush to those labels in how we're feeling about it in the moment. But what if instead of reacting, we stayed open to the unfolding of life? What if in this moment, with whatever you have going on, you were to say, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, but life is still unfolding. And what we believe is that we live in a universe that is for life. Life is for life. I live in a universe that is in a conspiracy for my good. That's what I believe. It makes me feel good, and that's also what we teach. So what if I was waiting for the unfolding of life, knowing and anticipating, expecting that the goodness of life for me was going to unfold, versus, oh my God, we're never going to come back from this. We don't always see the full picture. And what feels like loss right now might reveal something wonderful and new in the future. Something that you can only see in the rearview mirror. So what I'm talking about here is radical presence. Instead of thinking, oh no, this is horrible, you're never coming back from this, to watch and wait for the unfolding good that is happening for you. And it doesn't mean that when we're holding on to that pause and waiting, it doesn't mean that we don't grieve, that we don't act, and that we don't feel deeply. That's not what it means. It means that we're simply knowing that more is unfolding and that we have an intention. We have 25 years later, I'm moving to Las Cruces to lead my community. That's when I saw it 25 years ago. There's been a lot of, It's just life. It's life. It's all okay. Like, the process of going through that is okay. But my invitation to you is to practice the pause. Maybe. So, radical presence. Be deeply with what is rather than resisting what cannot be controlled. And ask, what are you holding on to that may no longer be serving you? Maybe unexamined beliefs, cultural assumptions, the need for certainty. A belief, for example, that people should be different. Oh my God. Did you hear what he said today? Did you see how she acted in the midst of this crisis? The idea that outrage is the only valid response. Or the thought that I can't be at peace until. I can't be at peace, fill in the blank, until something happens, until something shifts, until something changes. We can be at peace right now. Finding stillness. What happens when you soften? Now, when you're in the midst of a change that's hard, especially the ones that you don't want, if I'm going to ask you what happens when you soften, there might be like, are you kidding me? I'm not softening now. I'm not softening now. The world is on fire. Acknowledging change isn't enough. We also have to move into inner stillness to stay steady. And that can feel really hard to access in times where you're agitated, where you're activated. And stillness is not the enemy. Stillness does not equal disengagement. And I think that that's sometimes for me why I resist stillness in times of change and struggle and hard. Because I feel like the same as accepting what is or acknowledging what is, that somehow I'm giving up, I'm disengaging if I move. Well, how privileged am I to move into my stillness? Well, Barbara Holmes, she was a faculty member at the Center for Action and Contemplation in Albuquerque. She passed away late last year. Spiritual teacher, activist, writer. She's the author of the book, many books, but the one that I read was Joy Unspeakable. And I want to go to what I found. So she talks about crisis contemplation. This is the idea that in the midst of deep suffering and crisis, a profound spiritual awareness can emerge, not as a retreat from hardship, but as a way of moving through it. She connects this to the experience of enslaved people who, despite unimaginable suffering, found ways to cultivate inner resilience, spiritual depth, and communal strength in the midst of this experience of being enslaved. Through their songs and prayers, contemplation wasn't about escaping suffering, but about finding the sacred within it, a deep soul-level connection to something greater than their immediate circumstances. We can move into stillness in the midst of whatever crisis, whatever change, whatever unwelcome thing is happening, whatever disruption there may be. Unwanted change is hard, but something within us can emerge in the midst of it. Like the enslaved who found a way to keep their spirits alive through crisis, we too have an inner strength, a divine spark, a deep well of resilience that can rise up in our hardest moments. We can do this. It exists. Crisis contemplation. We can move into that stillness. One of the ways that we can do that I found is mindfulness. I'm moving throughout my day, and for just a moment, I can be present to the things that are happening. I can notice that down in Albuquerque, at least, the leaves are coming out. I just saw for the first time leaving that my beloved lilac bush that my neighbors have that bends over into my yard doesn't have baby leaves. It has kind of big leaves. Where have I been? In that moment, I can move into the presence of the beauty of my favorite bush and the thing that's coming, but it's growing. Winter is over in just a few more days. Spring is here. Mindfulness brings us to the present moment, even in the storm, even in the wind, even in the shifting sand. And mindfulness helps us to, even in those micro moments, to be still. And when we do that, we're moving into the eye of the storm. We're moving into the eye of the storm. And within that eye, we find spirit. And we can listen in that stillness. Even in the micro moments, we can listen for what spirit is calling us to do next. So the second spiritual tool is sacred listening. Take a breath. Take a breath. Be still. Pay attention to the smallest detail. The sparkle of the buckle on my shoe. Whatever. Just pay attention to the moment. And be willing to ask, what is mine to do? Not just what is everybody else doing? How is everybody else reacting? What are they saying is the right thing to do? Ask your higher self, the divine presence that is experiencing life as you. Ask that what's yours to do in the midst of this. And third, and perhaps most important, is acting from love and not fear. Change can often trigger fear and of the unknown. Right? It's change. I've not been over there, but I know what this is. It can trigger an experience of loss or a fear of getting it wrong. What I know is that fear drives division and anger and retreat and disagreement. But we, my friends, are called to something higher. It is that thing that when you're in change, you can feel pulling you, being pulled forth from you. We are called to something higher. Not that other people aren't called to something higher, but we are awake in a particular kind of way because we are part of groups like this. And we have been talking about this higher consciousness, this awareness, this connection to the divine that we each have. So we are being called to something higher. Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science, the author of The Science of Mind, our kissing cousin over in Science of Mind, Centers for Spiritual Living, that dude. He says there is a power for good in the universe greater than we are, and we can use it. That power is love. And I used to have a really interesting response to love. It was like mamby-pamby. I used to hate the word love. Oh, love. I would see the little cutouts with the little paper lace, kids when you do that, and the candies. And I just was like, love. Seriously, I had to get a necklace, and I wore it for a year because it said love. And I'm like, they're talking about love in this really powerful way, and I'm not getting it. Love is a powerful force. It is the binding force of life. Acting from love is not inaction. It means we move forward without making enemies of each other. In this time, in our history, we can move forward in love and not make enemies of each other. That is possible. You are being called to something higher. We hold space for those who suffer and for those who see change differently than we do in that expanse of love. And we become bridge builders. In this world, we need bridge builders. And you may not be able to see it, but I see your little tool belt and your little reflective jacket. You're bridge builders. So, love in action. Spiritual tool number 3, ask yourself, am I acting from love or fear? Am I speaking to build connection or deepen division? What would love have me do? So change is here, my friends, in many different ways, in the personal and in the greater social. How we meet it is up to us. So the 3 things: radical presence, acknowledge what is shifting, be with it. Sacred listening, find the stillness within the storm, discern what spirit is calling you to. And love in action. Move forward not from fear, but from love. Transformation comes when we meet challenges consciously, when we wake up to what we're doing and how we're engaging. May we be still enough to hear Spirit's call. May we be brave enough to answer it. And may we walk together through these winds of change and shifting sand, trusting that something greater is unfolding. Namaste.